Okay, for Craig is definitely having a problem. All right. I'm gonna do that. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Just keep going. Like I said, I got a local recorder going, so we're fine.
Okay. Um, so that was the first game that I ever did any runs of. It was Super Meat Boy, and it was just ILs. That's all it was. It was
Hmm.
just can I get A+ on every level? Can I get every bandage? And then it was how fast can I really go? My goal was originally top 50 on every level on the Xbox Live leaderboard,
Hmm.
which I think I either nearly did or totally did. I forget which one it was because it was just a while ago. Regardless, the point is, the first full game I ever ran was Shadow Complex.
Yo, good game.
Which, yeah, it's a great game. It has some really cool sequence breaks. And that was my first exposure to the world of competitive full game runs. And then eventually, I kind of landed on Ouya. That was the game that I played immediately afterwards.
Hmm.
And I originally started a while ago, or rather, with a very rudimentary way of going about it, which is just like I just played the game fast. That's all I did. I just played it the way that I knew how to play it, but I just did it quicker than I was used to doing it.
Hmm.
And my first runs, I do think these were pre 2010. So this was like 2009.
Oh wow.
My first ever run was like 4.5 hours, and I thought that was pretty good. I was like, oh yeah, that's not bad. I'm gonna take a look and see if there's any runs that are better. And eventually, I landed on a runner named Cannibal Canine, who is the OG runner of Ouya.
Mm.
He had a time on Speed Demos Archive way back in the day of, I believe it was, if I want to say 2 hours 17 minutes. I don't know how accurate that is. It's pretty close to that though.
Okay.
And it kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, look at all the stuff he's skipping. Look at all the things he's doing. This is crazy. And so what I did was, uh, I did pretty much what I would go on to do for my entire, 10 plus years of speedrunning, which is I stole all of his good strats and I replaced all of his bad strats with better strats. And the way that I did that back in the day was that I went on YouTube and I looked up your arsenal glitches, and I found all those like they kind of remind you of found footage camcorder videos from horror movies.
Yep.
And it was like random teenagers or like preteens screaming into their microphone, being like, "Look at this cool trick I found!" And I'd be like,
Yeah.
"That is a cool trick that you found."
It was like
Like,
Windows Movie Maker, and it had like Linkin Park in the background.
yeah, I want to say what's the name that comes to mind? I think it's Super Ouya Pro or like I forget. I'm sure if you do any amount of digging, you'll be able to find this person who put out tons of Ouya glitches way back in like 2011, 2012. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, we're jumping ahead a few years. I didn't really speedrun very much before college, and then in college, I only speedran a little bit before I had to basically stop to focus on school. But yeah, Ouya was the very very beginning. It was like if Super Meat Boy and Shadow Complex barely counted, Ouya was like my first love.
I get you. Yeah, as a bit of an aside, my first ever speed game was Super Mario Sunshine, and I played that for a while, but I never really really latched onto it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until Snap that I was like, okay, yeah, see now this is speedrunning, right? So
That's so
so
funny that you went from a game that has one of the most complex movement systems of any game out there to one of the games that has one of the least complex movement systems.
I think what I mean by that is like this is my speed. Like this is for me.
Oh yeah, no, no.
As opposed to like, no, this isn't a speed run. But I at my skill level it was too complicated. It was too much for me.
It
So
is funnier to think though that you're just like now
now
this
this
is
is what I call
speedrunning.
speed running. Now that's what I call speed running, number 10.
Yeah. Um but yeah, that's pretty cool. I think everybody has that game where you know it just kind of speaks to their soul a little bit, where they're
Hmm.
just like, this is the game for me.
That's right. All right. So you started like say 2009 or so. Were you said you had to stop for a couple years, right?
Yeah, I didn't really care all that much about speedrunning at first. The way that I found it initially was that I was it was 2008, or maybe it was, no, it would have been early 2009. I was in my, oh no, this would have been, I don't even remember what year it was, but I was in an intro level piano course in high school.
Okay.
And basically the teacher would allow us free time after we finished our work, which God love her for that, because so many other teachers would just force you to do mindless menial work for an entire class if you did
Yeah.
all your work quickly. But basically, I was one of the more advanced students because a lot of the other students had no musical experience at all. So my minimal music experience that I had allowed me to finish all my assignments very quickly and play them for her. And then afterwards, I could just be left to my own devices. And so I went on E-Bomb's World, as one did back in 2009,
Yeah.
and I found the Super Mario Brothers 3 TAS
Oh,
that beat any percent, and I believe it was 11 minutes. And it truly changed my life. As soon as I saw it, I was like, that's what I want to do. I love that. I don't know. I don't even know what this is, but I'm in love. So that's how it all truly began. And then
nice.
kind of went devolved from there, I guess.
I get you. I get you. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, um, you were doing runs. I think on speedrun.com you have some things in like 2013, and
Oh yeah,
then
yeah.
nothing not much till 2015 or so. But like
Yeah,
how?
sorry, I kind of deviated from the question at hand. Yeah, I had to stop for a while because college just became more important to me. And
That's fair.
then after I graduated college, I had a bunch of free times. This was 2014, and I was just like, oh, I'll try this whole speedrunning thing again, just see what happens.
I get you. Okay. So I think what I'm trying to get at here is that, like, we've talked about it in both the other videos, but Silence, right? Silence
Yeah,
is this crazy guy, shows up and just honestly changes the playing field, like in such a dramatic way that it affects like every other Ratchet and Clank game. Well, maybe
yeah,
that would be an exaggeration, but I mean, he's like literally one of the most important people in the series history.
yeah.
And we've talked about it 1,000 times, but I guess what I want to ask is like, what do you think are like the three biggest changes that came from Silence's runs?
Um, well, honestly, easily the biggest one is the movement technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, no one even knew what a neutral long jump was until Silence came around. And it's just such a bread and butter piece of tech now that if you don't know how to do it, you realistically don't even know how to play the game. Um, so that's easily the biggest one. Um, I would say another huge one was the sequence break that allows you to skip Aquatos and Tyrannosis. That was a pretty big game changer because you're essentially moving the entire game forward several minutes just off of the back of not having to do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say, in general, and this is less of a specific movement or glitch thing and more just a conceptual way he changed the scene, was that the emphasis on precision went way up. I mean, the dude was putting up crazy times. I mean, at the time, the second best runner of NG Plus had over an hour, or maybe just under. You know, Insomniac Nintendo, he was floating somewhere around the hour mark.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes Silence, you know, saving 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because he found all the movement tech, it's because he actually implemented it in smart ways, and he moved the scene forward through just a very clean movement, very clean execution. And he kind of set this standard that if you want to play with the big dogs, you got to be able to replicate this kind of stuff. And this was something that took a long time for people to do. I mean, IN in Insomniac Nintendo, just for the sake of the recording,
Hmm.
is one of the greatest runners in the series history. And even back in the day, he had the hardest time in the world, even trying to keep up with Silence's world record of 37:46. It was just hard, you know. It was extremely tough to beat, and it took a ton of innovation. It took many, many, many months for all these runners to be able to reverse engineer what he taught us, what he was doing, and then for us to be able to do it faster than him. I mean, it just took a ton of time.
I
I
imagine.
bel
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe his run was done in like early to mid 2014, and it wasn't beaten until an entire year later, which in the world of speedrunning is like basically an entire era.
Yeah.
You know, like I know it doesn't sound like a lot to say that it took a year to beat something, but considering how open the knowledge is and how much people collaborate to learn things in speedrunning, it's no exaggeration to say that a year is much much longer than the average perception.
Absolutely. Do you think that as soon as that happened, like as soon as Silence dropped to 37:46, I think you said, um,
Mhm.
do you was as soon as that happened, it's like, all right, everyone's already like, all right, we got to figure out how this works, right? And they were trying that whole time, or did you think it took some time for people to really pick up on it? Like I guess if you since you were there, could you tell me like there was a year until it was beaten? Were people working on this every day for that whole year?
Now, I missed the first chunk of this. I actually missed the initial discovery. So this discovery happened in early to mid 2014, and I didn't join the scene until October 2014.
Gotcha.
By that point, everybody had everything figured out. And back then, I mean, I know nowadays there are resources for pretty much any major speed game or speed series, but back then there were no resources. And so anytime somebody came into the scene, a lot of emphasis was spent on the runners who had garnered the knowledge from reverse engineering all of his stuff into teaching it to the other runners. And so I remember the two people that I credit to helping me learn the game were Insomniac Nintendo, who was obviously number two at the time,
Mhm.
and Slaughter or Mitch. And he was never really an Ouya runner, but he knew all the movement tech. He was amazing at Ratchet 1. And so it wasn't too hard for him to learn all the Ouya technology. And the way that he taught me was that he would explain concepts to me. But since I'm not much of an oral learner, there's certain ways I can learn things by hearing them, but technical things, I can't do that. And so what he would do is he would explain something, and then I would say I don't get it, and then he would draw graphs in Microsoft Paint, and he would be screen sharing it through Skype, and or like I don't even know if screen sharing was a thing back then, but he would just like draw graphs and then post them in the Skype group, and then be like, okay, so this is like it would just be like crappy hand drawn little paintings in Microsoft Paint, and he would just like dump it in there and be like, okay, so this is how this concept works. I'd be like, oh, okay. And eventually, after a lot of practice, I would finally get it. You know, Ian would help me out while I was streaming, and Mitch would help me out in calls or like after the fact because he couldn't even join calls. Back in the day, his parents wouldn't let him ever join calls with strangers on the internet, and so he would be in IRC chat or Skype chat like all the time, but that was about it. And so it was just like this weird smattering of information that got. It's almost like I don't know. It's like the passing stories down. Like I don't know. You imagine like in the 1700s before people had like like the capacity to write
Mhm.
books to store knowledge, or like the way that traditions are passed down in like Hawaiian culture.
Yeah, we
You know,
sit
like
around the fire and we pass the pipe around. Ah,
yeah,
yes, let old Mitch talk. He's,
yeah,
ah, back in
exactly.
my day.
It was crazy. It was really insane. But they really spent a lot of time. I mean, I know the person who spent the most amount of time on it was Insomniac Nintendo because his knowledge or his thirst for knowledge and speedrunning is pretty insatiable. If he wants to understand something, he'll sit down and he'll try to learn it.
Awesome.
So he really spent a lot of time because Silence couldn't even explain it to us. I mean, there's a whole language barrier there.
Hmm.
And so it's not like he could really sit down and explain what a neutral long jump is. And I mean, thankfully, Ian has one of the brightest minds in speedrunning that I've ever even seen. So he was able to reverse engineer a lot of it by himself, as well as with the help of a few other people.
Beautiful. Um, we had talked. You kind of mentioned it, like the whole like skipping the Tyrannos and whatever. Can you explain that just a smidge more? Like I'm aware, but can you like go in more detail about what it is that he skipped and how he skipped it?
Sure. So the way that the planets in Up Your Arsenal are sequenced, it goes Veldin, Florana, Marcadia. Then after you do all of Marcadia, which takes, 10 plus minutes, then you do Annihilation Nation. And then after you finish Annihilation Nation, you normally go to Aquados, and then to Tyrannosis, and then to Dax. And the skip that Silence found, after you finish Tyrannosis, you unlock a training course on the main hub of the game, the Starship Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And the Starship Phoenix, there's a lot of stuff you can do there, but once you beat Tyrannosis, you are able to do a training course that allows you to unlock the Hypershot and the Hacker. Or I forget if it's the Hacker in that game. I'm not 100% sure what the mini game is called, but it's most people really, really hate it. It's a very tedious and annoying game.
Mm-hmm.
But what Silence found out is that the training course, even though you naturally unlock it after Tyrannosis, it's loaded into the Starship Phoenix from the very first time you go there. It's always loaded in. It's just, translated X distance away from the main hub.
Right.
And normally there's no way to effectively get there because, what developer intended way could possibly get you there. But what Silence found out is if you use the mega turrets to clip through a couple of walls, you can whip jump all the way to the training course and you just barely make it. I mean, that's the craziest part of the trick is that the setup is actually pretty precise, even for players nowadays. I mean, even really, really experienced runners still mess up this trick. And the fact that he was able to find it effectively by himself in 2014 is just insane. And so he manages to go, instead of doing all those planets in that sequence, you go from Veldin to Florana, and then instead of going from the Starship Phoenix and then to Marcadia, you skip immediately to Dax. You skip all of those planets, all 4 of them. And you have to go back to Marcadia and Annihilation Nation to collect a couple things you need to finish the game, but there's nothing that you need to complete the game on Aquados or Tyrannosis. You're supposed to just unlock Dax from there.
Right.
And so by unlocking Dax, you skip those 2 planets, which saves a ton of time.
Absolutely. Was there anything in the later game that was skipped, or is it mainly just that section right there?
The ones that come to mind, I mean, there's the big one is Iridia, which is just a series of ranger missions. Although the missions really only give you one item that you use, or they give you a gadget that you use twice called the warp pad. I forget what it's called. Let me Google this real quick.
Love it. It's been so long since you played the game the intended way. You don't even know the names of the things that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it is called the warp pad. So you unlock the warp pad from completing Iridia. But the thing is, you only ever use the warp pad 2 times in rapid succession on Quark's hideout. And so if you can find a way to skip the warp pad sections, you don't need to do Iridia at all. And so Silence figured out, and this actually wasn't a Silence discovery. People knew how to skip the warp pad, but the way that Silence found out how to do it, not only skip the warp pad, but the entirety of the planet. I mean, it's a really long planet and a very difficult one at that. One of the most brutal casual levels in the entire series. And Silence found out a way to skip from the very, very beginning to the very, very end in under 15 seconds. So it was just a crazy discovery. I mean, and pretty much there's so many levels that are like that. I mean, the same thing happens on the second to last level, Koros. The same thing happens so many times. Um, so there's just all these crazy sequence breaks that happen within planets themselves that allow you to save a ton of time that we just never even thought about. So
Mm.
not only was he an extremely prolific runner, he was also an extremely prolific strat hunter. So much so that people theorize that there's almost no way he could have done this by himself. Now, if that's true or not, I don't know if we'll ever know because it's very hard to get into contact with the guy. But I mean, I personally have no reason to believe that he didn't find all this stuff by himself.
Yeah, I mean, why would you not? But then again, who knows?
Yeah.
Because wasn't he? He's a like even before those speedruns, didn't he have a ton of stuff on like a channel that was all like Ouya glitches that were all just sort of like silly and exploration based? Like, oh hey, you can like jump on top of this area.
Yeah, he did that for Ouya. He did that for Deadlocked. I think he may have even done it for Ratchet 2. He was just he had a very curious mind about the game. He just really wanted to break it down and explore everything that was possible.
Yeah, sounds like he was just a dedicated glitch hunter guy. So
Hmm.
sounds right up his alley.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move a little forward in time, right?
Hmm.
Um, so just looking at the leaderboards, which, take that with a grain of salt, the leaderboards are never truly accurate, but looking kind of at snapshots through time, it looks like you and Squonk and Ricky are all coming up around the same time. Um, was it like a competition to beat Silence, or was it like a friendly rivalry, or how would you describe? I guess it was a pretty tight knit community back then, right?
Squonk and Ricky didn't really make a huge splash in the community until after I dethroned Silence. Um,
Okay.
the race to beat Silence was pretty much entirely between myself and Insomniac Nintendo.
Hmm.
And basically, IN was the golden child of the Ratchet community. Everyone loved IN. Everyone thought he was easily the best runner in the entire world, regardless of, or at least, assuming we're not talking about Silence. Like, everyone assumed that on a good day, IN could beat anybody. That was like, in many ways, it's very similar to how people view Mango in Super Smash Brothers, where it's like if he's playing at his peak, nobody can beat him,
Yeah.
or at least that's what people claim. Um, the problem that IN had was that he was never much of a grinder, because I think he just did not enjoy putting in tons of hours just to be endlessly frustrated by resets all the time.
Mm.
And I didn't really have the skill, but I had the determination. And so I'd be plugging away. I'd be doing hours upon hours every day. And I was kind of, people would rag on me for a lot at first because I just wasn't very consistent. There was a lot of concepts that I just didn't really understand all that well, so I didn't have good consistency. And for a really, really long time, I couldn't even do some of the more major skips consistently. And I'd be playing for months and months, and I couldn't even break or sub 40, you know. And so when I finally broke sub 40, I want to say this was like maybe 4 months into grinding. People were finally starting to take me a little bit seriously, and I think IN kind of realized that if he didn't pick up the pace, then I would slowly start to take over. And
Mm.
so eventually I start whittling my time down, and I eventually beat IN. But then he kind of picks up the pace and he starts grinding as well. And the race is then on to see who can beat Silence first. And I just specifically remember there were so many streams where IN would just grind for like, it would just be in short bursts. It would be like once every week and a half, he would just grind for like 7 straight hours and then get really annoyed and then play random YouTube videos to like blow off his frustration at the end of the stream, and then just shut off the stream. And he was a micless streamer, so he never talked. So it was just like there was so much expression. Like he was a silent person, but he was a very loud person when you could tell he was frustrated. Like the silence that would happen when he would pause his game after losing a run to something really stupid, it was deafening.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, it was very funny. But it was kind of our rivalry because we had known each other. We had been competing already since 2012, and he had always been considered the better runner. So I think there was some pride attached to it on his end. But you know, for as much as there are talented people in this world, hard work will always have its time in the sun. And so my hard work eventually just began outpacing IN's ability to play the game better than me. And I believe I got 38 before he did, and then I got a 37 before he did, and then I finally beat Silence before he was able to. And the Silence bop was the hardest part because the toughest climb always comes right before you're at the peak of the summit. And I remember it took me weeks. I was stuck like, you know, I was maybe 10 seconds off his time, maybe even less than that. But it's so funny because I find in speedrunning what often happens is the longer it takes you to beat a certain barrier or a certain time, the more like enormous the breakthrough eventually becomes when it happens. So when I beat Silence, I didn't just beat his time. I annihilated it. I think I got like when the world record was 37:46, I think I got like a 37:20. And so, you know, it like when the breakthrough happened, it was so sweet. It was so relieving. And I think I sang like a really cringy song afterwards, and I really regret that pop off.
Can you feel a brand new day?
Can I?
Yeah, I don't talk about it. I deeply cringe every time I think about that.
Can I? I'm going to share something with you really quickly.
Sure.
On my list of questions, my next question that I was going to ask you is, can you feel a brand new day?
I don't know, man. I really don't want to feel these emotions I'm feeling right now. Yeah, you know, it was basically I'm not gonna lie, I was cringe back in the day, and I stayed cringe for a long time. I'd like to think I'm a little bit past my cringe phase, but you never truly, you don't kill the part of you that's cringe, you just kill the part of you that cringes. You know?
Zemi dies from cringe.
Dude, I'm ugh.
Zemi cringe but fast.
Cringe but fast. But no, it was a big moment for me. Like all things considered, it was like I felt like I had proved something. I always felt like there was for a really long time in the Ratchet community, I felt like people were trying to always deny my skill. Like they would always try to like find ways to diminish my accomplishments. Like a big one for a long time was, oh, he's not that good. He just plays the game more than everyone else, which I don't really know what else you can do in speedrunning. But that was a big one for a couple of years.
Well, look at this guy with his hard work instead of raw talent, huh?
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, but that was like a big emphasis in the community. It was like it was based on style. It was based on how cool you could look while you were doing it. And so I wasn't very cool. I was a very different kind of player. I think the best way to describe my play style in Ratchet and Clank is surgical. I don't like doing flashy. I can do flashy stuff. I don't like doing flashy stuff. I would rather be the guy who can hone his play style to the point where I can do the same option at least 98 times out of 100 with no drops in consistency. If I can get to that point, I'm happy. Whereas some other people would be like, we're going to do this cool flashy thing and we'll only hit it 30% of the time, but when we hit it, it'll look sick, you know?
Yeah.
But that's not to say my style is slow either. It's just I have a very methodical way that I practice. And that's what I feel has always given me an edge in a lot of ways, is that I think my background as a musician has always led me to having a better practice routine than a lot of other people. But that being
makes sense.
said, I just, I really relished in those moments where I felt like I proved people wrong. And so even though it was cringy, it came from a very genuine place. So it's a part of my history in this game, and I'm not going to apologize for it, but I will feel, a little remorseful that I wasn't at least like 5% cooler.
Hey, listen, we can't change who we were.
Yeah, true.
Alrighty. Yeah, I mean, it's monumental, right? So I don't know. I think it's kind of cringy to be like, "Oh man, I just was," but it's like, I don't know, man. Listen, you did get overcome a huge obstacle, like taking down a world record that stood for over a year. You know,
It was
like,
considered unbeatable. Like
yeah,
it's no exaggeration to say that back in the day, people thought it would stand for many, many years. Like that, no one would catch up to it for a very long time.
hmm
So I was pretty proud of myself.
yeah, as you should be. It was like deciphering alien technology. It was like
Hmm.
they dropped like a cube, and you're like, "What is this?" Like, So I understand. So now that you're on top, you
Hmm.
finally took down the king.
Yeah,
You're at the summit of the mountain. What is your motivation to keep going?
obsession, um, a lack of a sense of purpose, spite. I mean, I'm not saying all these are healthy, but
Yeah.
these were my motivations back in the day.
hmm
Um, Now that I proved I was the best, I wanted to prove that no one else deserved to be at the summit.
Hmm.
That I would do everything in my power to deny people the glory that I had spent so long trying to achieve myself. Um, and I did this because I don't know what it is, but I think it's just because I didn't have a whole lot in my life growing up. Like I had family that loved me very much, but I was a stupid kid. I never appreciated that, and I never really, um, when you're a kid, you don't really understand how much that's worth,
hmm
and so to me, even though that was the one thing that I had in spades, I had always felt like I never had much else, and it was always the stuff that I was lacking that drove me. And I was a deeply competitive person because I was the younger child. My brother was 8 years older than me,
Oh
and
gosh.
he would whoop my ass at every single thing we ever did. And so it fueled me to become this competitive monster. Um, and so when I finally beat everybody, I wanted to prove that I could continue beating everybody as well.
Hmm.
And especially even though I had technically proven myself to be the best, there were still people that doubted me. There were still people that denied my skill. Like I said, people still said, "Oh, well, IN's better. He just doesn't play the game as much," or like, he only got it because he played the game a billion hours, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted to make it undeniable that I wanted to make it so that nobody could deny my skill anymore. And so that drove me for a really long time. And eventually, a couple of other challengers arose. I mean, obviously, IN wanted to beat me, and
Right.
then came Super Squonk as well, who was a very he was slow to start. He wasn't a very good runner at first, but he was tenacious. He had a very curious mind, and he had a passion for speedrunning that not many other people have. And so he wanted to beat me as well. Um, and so there was this trinity for a while once Squonk started to rise through the ranks, where he wanted to beat me, IN wanted to beat me. Eventually, another runner, Tarnowena, came around. He wanted to beat me. And I just wanted to continue proving to everybody that if you want to beat me, you're going to have to try a little harder than that.
Hmm.
And so, it was my record. I wanted to keep it. And so I kept it. And I kept it as long as I felt that fire within me. And there were times where it got a little dicey. There was actually a story where It was, I want to say, October or November 2015. The world record at the time was somewhere around 34 or 35 minutes. And
34:54.
that sounds right to me.
Okay.
And um, unfortunately, as is what happens in life sometimes, my grandpa was about to pass on. And it wasn't something out of the blue. It was something that had been building up for a while.
Mhm.
And one day I got the call from my mom that was like, Zem, it's time. You have to get over here. He's gonna pass soon. And so, I'm having one of the worst weekends of my entire life. I pack
Mhm.
up all my stuff. I get on a bus, and somehow, even though it was a direct bus from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, the the mega bus that I had rode lost my luggage. They just straight up lost my luggage
What in tarnation?
on a direct bus with one stop. That's it. It was just Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. One stop in Philadelphia. That's it. They lost my luggage. And so I wore pajamas that day because I wanted to ride the bus in comfort. And when I lost my luggage, or when they lost my luggage rather, I didn't have any clothes to go to the hospital with. So I'm just sitting there, sad and depressed, watching my grandpa die while I'm in my pajamas. And I stayed the night at my brother's house before we went to the hospital. And that night, Insomniac Nintendo discovered a 45-second time save.
Oh my gosh.
And so, Super Squonk at the time was only 40 to 45 seconds off of my personal best, off of what was the world record at the time. And I just remember, and I mean, I want to start by saying that I hold no ill will towards him at all. He was overly eager, and he was a stupid, we're all stupid kids. We all do stupid stuff.
Mhm.
His stream title, as soon as the strat got found, he turned on stream and started grinding runs. And his title read, "Trying to get world record before Zem comes back."
That's
It's so there I am, like with the harrowing idea in the back of my brain that I'm about to go watch my grandpa die. And then I'm just watching this person trying to like callously take my world record from me
yeah.
during one of
Sharks
the
in the
worst-
water.
Yeah, dude. They smelled an ounce of blood and then pounced on it. It was wild. I was so mad, dude. And Squonk and I want to be clear. I was such a competitive freak that it was very difficult for me to be friends with people. I was not a good role model in the community for a very long time, and I wholly admit that. And so when I saw this, I tore into Squonk. I tore into him. I was like, how could you do this? This is like one of the most spiteful things I've ever seen. It started a huge argument. But like, luckily, I mean, a lot of success is skill and some of it is luck. Luckily he wasn't able to put together a run. The strat was too new, even though the strat wasn't very difficult. The nerves that came with him being close to world record caused him to choke a lot of runs. And he wasn't able to get it before I came back. And then when I came back, I just crushed the world record. I think I dropped it by like 30 or 40 seconds almost overnight. But yeah, that was a pretty awful weekend. But it was looking back on it now and knowing that he didn't mean any harm by it. He was just, he just wrote a clueless title that like, he was just being very honest. It was kind of a Sigma move in a way, to just like totally put out exactly what he was feeling out there. I want to get world record before Zem comes back. I mean, he couldn't have known the full context of why I was gone.
Yeah. I'm glad we can look back on this and laugh.
Dude, it's so funny looking back on it. Like all the arguments I've ever had with people, now that I'm cool with pretty much everybody, it's like it's so funny to see just how like insecure I was and like how like how much worth I attached to this meaningless I mean, it's not meaningless. It's an amazing accomplishment that I feel very proud about. But at the end of the day, does it matter? Am I a worse person if I don't have a world record for a couple of days?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
like but yeah, it's funny looking back on it now. But at the time, it was a very hurtful experience to go through.
I imagine.
I can hear the YouTube comments on that part of the video now. Half of them are gonna be like, "Bro, what a scumbag, super squonk." It's like it's not Zem's world record, man. It's like the communities. Or so. I can read them. They're
Dude,
burning in my head.
I'm gonna tell you right now, like if that makes it into the video, any YouTube comment about it is gonna be like, dude, Squonk is such a Chad, and he is. He is a Chad. Like I will go on record saying that he is a Chad. I love Squonk. Like even though Squonk and I beefed back in the day, I have nothing but love for that guy. He is so funny. I love Squonk.
I'm glad you could squonk that beef.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. So that was a close call, right? Were there any other close calls?
That was the closest one by far. There was another one that was pretty close where I believe many years later, Captain Wiffle got within I want to say 20 seconds of world record, and that was the closest anyone had been in years. I kind of ran away with it for a while, and anytime anyone would ever get close, I would just come back and lower the record more. Wiffle, I forget what era of Ouya this was. This might have been like high 28 level. But that was the only other one that was super close until I actually lost the record.
Okay. Tell you what, put a pin on that because I'm going to get back to Wiffle towards the end here.
Sure.
Let's kind of keep moving through the timeline here.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was a 45-second time save. What even was that time save?
That was VidComic 2 skip.
Okay.
So the way the VidComic 2 skip works, and this was found, of course, by IN. Normally, the way that we would do the VidComics, you have to do VidComic 1. You have to skip VidComic 1 to get to VidComic 2. You have to skip VidComic 2 to get to VidComic 3, etc., etc., all the way until VidComic 4. And as far as we knew, there was no way to skip any of them because they were just totally sequential. Until IN found out about a trick where you can store a skip a skip comic menu by pressing X and circle. No, X and square on the same frame when you're opening up a VidComic. So like X opens up the skip comic menu and square opens up the password menu that closes out the window. And if you press them both at the same time, it stores the skip comic menu. So what this effectively meant was you still couldn't skip VidComic 1 because that was part of a natural cutscene. You couldn't skip VidComics 3 or 4 for the same reason. However, VidComic 2, the only way to unlock VidComic 2, or at least, the way that you would naturally unlock VidComic 2, you would go to Annihilation Nation 1, and you would have to do the arena mission. So basically you would do the gauntlet of Annihilation Nation 1, and then afterwards you have to do the gauntlet to unlock the tier guys. And I think we skipped the tier guys section. We didn't really have to do that. But we didn't learn for a long time that you can totally just skip the first VidCom or the first Annihilation Nation gauntlet as well. We didn't realize that for a long time. Because we just didn't realize it would be possible. We thought we needed VidComic 2, but then when IN found this, we could just totally skip the first section of Annihilation Nation. And so now we still have to go back and visit it because there's a second portion that you need to unlock a later level. But you can just skip the first 45 seconds that you would normally need to do the gauntlet. And so this was huge. I mean, this was really, really huge. And it was not a hard trick. I mean, even though it's frame perfect, technically, not all frame perfect tricks are created equal. I mean, pressing 2 buttons on the same frame, yes, that's frame perfect. Is it difficult? Absolutely not. The only difficult part about it is that sometimes you can input buttons at the wrong time, and then you end up entering the VidComic on accident, and that loses a ton of time. It loses like 15, 20 seconds. But aside from that, if you mess it up, normally you just try it again and it loses like maybe a second and a half tops.
Right.
So it was a pretty low risk, high reward strategy, which is exactly what you want in a game as difficult as Ouya.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the big 45-second was VidComic 2 skip.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other major time saves? Because I mean, you're clearly like knocking the time down. Was there anything that stood out, or was it mainly just like we just find ways to do things slightly faster?
This is where I don't get a lot of credit. There were certainly major strats that were found all throughout the game's history, and I mean, to rattle them all off would be very difficult. It would take a lot of time. And I'm not the best person to rattle off the strats that were discovered throughout history because I didn't really have much of a hand in finding the major stuff. But where I don't get a lot of credit, I was never the guy who found 20 to 30 to 45-second time saves. I was always the guy who took very small portions of the game and made them 1 second faster, 2 seconds faster. You know, I would find all these spots all over the place, and I never sought credit for them just because it's not as if it's a strat, it's just a movement update. And I would just find those all over the place just from practicing the game over and over. And that was like, and just better execution. Like that's really all it came down to. It's just I was executing better. I was learning how to do things faster just through the sheer number of hours I played. I mean, at a certain point in time, like I'd be playing this game 6 to 10 to sometimes even 12 hours a day.
Gosh. And
so, it's no question why I would eventually gain consistency and gain speed. So yeah, I mean, it was a combination of everything. There would always be a major strat found, and then accompanying that, there'd always be these small little movement updates that I would find, or IN would find, or Squonk would find. And so, yeah, the time just kept getting pushed lower and lower due to so many different factors.
Okay. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Any major milestones that you thought were important? Obviously, we beat Silence, and that was like 37, and then got closer to 35. I think I have it written down somewhere that there are some major milestones like 35, 33, 31. Anything you want to talk about on those?
It's kind of hard to remember. I mean, there's so many crazy milestones, and some of them are much more important than others. I would say the next big one was Agdq. Agdq 2016 was. I mean, I don't want to say it's. I feel like it's a bit overzealous to say that that's one of the most defining moments in the community's history, but it's certainly up there. Because that was what put Ratchet and Clank on the map.
Yeah, because I think before that it was just Synux, right? How many other runs were there of Ratchet and Clank before that one?
There were two. There was Synux's run, and then before that, oh my god, what was his name? It was like Death something. I have to look this up.
Deathfire 321.
Deathfire 321.
We talked about that correct too. I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. And those
runs were not great.
both those runs were really, really bad. I mean, let's not mince words here. And so the push that I had in my head was that I just wanted to get into GDQ. It was always my dream to get into GDQ ever since the first time I ever found a GDQ. I was like, someday I hope that's me. And I grinded and grinded, and then I eventually got in after I got rejected from SGDQ 2015, and that broke my spirit. But I didn't let it deter me because I'm nothing if not a grind monkey at the core of my being. I'm pretty proud to say that I'm the person who will always, always, always put in the hours for something that I want. And that's something that I've, sometimes I lose that fire. I mean, I think everybody does from time to time, but I'm really happy that in speedrunning, at the very least, speedrunning is the only time I can ever say I've done that, which is why I put so much of my pride and worth as like a professional into speedrunning, is because I think speedrunning is the only place I've ever truly loved grinding as much as I have. I've loved every second of practice I've ever put into the games. Um, and I can't even say that about opera, which is what I went to school for. um, and so yeah, I don't know. I put in a ton of hours. I remember I even put in this is some deep lore, although it's still on my YouTube channel. When I got into Agdq, I even put together a cute little trailer. That's actually the first video I ever edited on my own.
Nice.
And it was called I forget exactly what the exact title is, but it was like the GDQ run you didn't know you wanted. And I put together like a cute little movement montage, and it was like really poorly edited. But it had a lot of heart in it, and I was really proud of it. But yeah, like that was such a huge moment for me. And I also remember one of my favorite moments of that. In the practice room, I would, because a lot of people go to GDQs to party, and nowadays I definitely do that. But back then, I was like, I want to make this run really something special. And so every night at about 10 or 11 p.m., I sat in the practice room and I practiced for 3 straight hours until my run. Or I did that every day until my run.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I even got world record in the practice room, but I didn't have it recorded. So the official world record at the time was 33:19, but I ended up getting a 33:13, and I couldn't prove it. And which was super funny. But I ended up getting a 34:19, which I'm very, very proud of that run because I was so nervous in the first like 5 minutes of running. And I made about like a solid minute of mistakes in the first 5 minutes. And then I just played pretty lights out from there. Now I remember something. There was a really huge innovation, scrunchless.
Oh yeah.
So scrunchless, for those unaware, there is a level called Hollow Star Studios where you play as Clank, and at one point you have to go find Scrunch the monkey, and you have to send him across a bridge to lower or to raise the bridge rather, so that you can walk across it. However, if you glide along a very specific portion of pixels on the railing that's attached to the bridge, you can go across the bridge without ever needing scrunch at all. And back in the day, it was considered really hard. I mean, like, I would practice it for, hours, and I would get it maybe a few times an hour maximum.
Gosh.
And it was just so hard, I couldn't figure it out. And then at GDQ, I had a really wild realization. Back in the early days, I didn't have a big TV. I couldn't afford anything because I was broke. I just graduated college. I had never come from money. I never had much money to my name. And the TV that I was using was I'm not even kidding when I say this, a 12-inch CRT.
That's pretty small.
Yeah, I mean I mean, nowadays I don't think I've seen a monitor in a store that's less than 24 inches. Like, even laptops don't come that small.
You're not wrong.
And so at GDQ, they had these massive CRTs. I mean, they must have been 48, 50, 52 inches.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I sat down at one of these CRTs, I started hitting scrunchless every single time. Like, I'm not kidding. I remember I couldn't hit it, more than 3 times an hour on my old CRT. And then I sat down at this huge TV and I hit it 15 times in a row. And I was like, oh my God, it's because my TV's too small.
You couldn't see it. There was a line on there. You couldn't see it.
I couldn't see it at all. And so that was a huge 40-second time save. And so, I implemented that and I got to show it off at GDQ. I mean, that's one of my proudest moments of the entire run. One of my proudest moments was hitting scrunchless in front of an audience of 120,000 people,
First try, wasn't it?
First try. I have to this day, I have never missed scrunchless in a marathon run. No matter what the stakes, no matter how big or how small it was, I've never missed scrunchless. And it all started right there. And So that was a huge run for me, and I wanted to grind to 32 after that, and so that was my goal for a while, was 32. And then eventually I was like, I think I can go a little bit lower, and that's when the 3156 came around.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think I was actually talking about this with Sneepy not too long ago of like what my most high quality and or most memorable runs were in Ouya. And we eventually came down to the consensus of 3156, 3129, the first sub 29, not even the first sub 30. I mean, actually, no, the first sub 30 was a huge one. That one, I know I spent that was my longest PB dry spell ever when I played Ouya. I think it took me like over 3 weeks of straight grinding to close out a 6-second PB. Which I know that doesn't sound like a long time, considering that most people will spend like months trying to optimize their game. But I mean, granted, bear in mind at this point, I was putting in literally 12 hours a day. Because I remember this was August 2018. I was about to move from Pittsburgh, where I was living at the time, and I just had like 3 free weeks before I moved. And so I was living with a friend at the time, and I would stream Ouya 8 hours a day, and then when I was done streaming, I would play offline for 4 more hours, just practicing. And I did that every single day. And then I think my highest quality run, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself by saying this, but I still think to this day, my highest quality run was I want to say 2816 was my best. I think to this day, still my best. Or no, 2806. It was my 2806 that was my best run by far. It was one of the two. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was 2806. Which actually, I'm gonna, if you give me just a second here, I am gonna look this up.
Go ahead.
Let's see here. Some of best segments. That's what I'm looking. Yes. My 2806 was 27 seconds off of my sum of bests. So in a 28-minute run, I lost less than 1 second to my best ever splits per minute of gameplay.
That's really impressive.
I've literally never been more proud of a run in my entire life. And I know that someday I will surpass that, but for now, I think that's my proudest run. Unfortunately, it got quickly obsoleted by, I mean, at this point, like nearly a minute of time saves that have been found since then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's easily my proudest run.
Okay.
To
Good
date.
All right. Let's change the topic a little bit here, and
Sure.
I'm curious. So is the bot project relevant to the story at all?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The bot project was basically, okay, so in my most dominant years in Ratchet and Clank history were 2016 to like 2018, 2019.
Okay.
Because I was just so far ahead of the pack, and I feel no like shame or like there's, I'm not trying to say this to gas myself up. I'm just trying to say this because it was the honest truth. I was ruthless. I was a ruthless runner. I held 10 OG trilogy main leaderboard it was 9 original trilogy category world records at the same time, and I had one in All for One, but that's a meme game, so no one really cares about that. But I basically had a stranglehold on the leaderboard, and the way that I would operate is that anytime anyone came close to beating one of my records, I would relentlessly grind that category and lower my time so they couldn't beat my time. I was truly like the gatekeeper. And I was not kind about it either. I was not a very encouraging person. I did it to bolster my own ego, to make myself look better than everyone else. Um, and that was essentially once people started catching up in skill. I couldn't really, you can't do that anymore. Like, there's only a certain level of dominance you can have before the rest of the field catches up.
Yeah.
It happens in literally every competitive sport. There's every competitive activity, competitive sport, competitive game. There's no situation where you will see somebody be that dominant for that long before people start catching on. I mean, there's a few exceptions, maybe. I mean, I don't know how big into chess you guys are or the constituency of speed docs is, but there's not many people out there in the world who can do what Magnus Carlsen is doing, being the reigning champion for nearly 10 years now. But people started catching up, and it became impossible to defend every world record because you'd see one person grinding this category, another person grinding this category, and then after a certain point you just can't hold on to it.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of talk, as there usually was, about like dethroning me because I was the Ratchet guy.
Yep.
And after a while, I got a little hot headed, as I did in the late 2010s. And I was like, you know what? You guys think you're so good. I'm going to prove that I still have what it takes to beat all of you in all of these categories. And so I made it a point of getting world record at least once in 10 different categories. And it was a very, very ambitious project because there was just a massive number of categories I was trying to tackle. And I think within a few months, I had gotten a world record in all of them but one, and it was Ratchet 1 NG+. Mm-hmm. And I still haven't had Ratchet 1 NG+ world record since then, but I honestly don't feel too bad about that because, it's the Ratchet 1 NG+ people who are super competitive in that category tend to not really run many other categories or many other games.
Gotcha.
So it's people still make fun of me for how bad I am at Ratchet 1 NG+, but I can still keep up with some people. I've got like a 20. I've got like a mid to low 20 right now. I'm not that bad at the category. But it definitely spawned. I mean, I was still world record holder in Ouya NG+ at the time, so it wasn't really about Ouya NG+, it was about all the other categories more so than anything else.
That's fair. I guess one of my questions was more or less like, was there like any crossover? Like, what was happening, in there? But I don't know if that applies.
Do you mean like, was there like a community backstory to it, or was there like a related Ouya category? Like, what more would you like to know about the bot project specifically?
That's a good question. I don't actually really know. I was like, wasn't there a bot project? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was that important? Was that relevant to this? So.
It's not super relevant to Ouya NG+, but okay. it was like a pretty. I mean, I hate to call anything that I do in the community like an occasion worth remembering or whatever, because I feel like that just sounds conceited. But it was definitely something that has been the source of many memes of the community, and I'm currently doing another one where I'm trying to get to world record level in every game, not every category, but just every game, one category in every game.
Okay.
And it's tough because I'm also trying to shift focus as a content creator, but that's a conversation for later.
Yeah. I get you. Okay. Let's see here. One of the more recent milestones that I think has been really interesting is we finally broke into the 27-minute barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What was the journey like? I mean, how many more minute barriers do you think there are?
We're rapidly approaching 26. It's currently not doable, but a perfect run would not be that far off either. Right now, the world record is 27:41 by Tarna, which is a very good run. Don't get me wrong. But the lower limit of human ability is somewhere around low 27:10s. It's obviously very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
But that's also not that far off from 26,
Mm-hmm.
We're closer than we've ever been. and we keep randomly finding stuff. So, you know, I'm not going to say it's not possible that it won't happen. I would say 2022 could be the year it becomes possible.
There you go. You heard it here
and-
first.
Yeah, and if it's possible, I will eventually try to make it happen. That's the way I've always been in Ouya. So, yeah.
Okay. So the world record is 2741 by somebody other than you.
Mm-hmm.
The Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal has been the Zem show for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me. Tell me about Tarnowina.
Yeah, I'll tell you about Tarnowina. Tarna has been a runner for as long as I can remember. He's always been the kind of person who would put in a lot of time and then kind of burn out, and then put in a little bit of time and then burn out. And he was always good. He always had good movement, but he never really had the mental fortitude to get it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I think he just got tired of always playing second fiddle. And I think he seriously sat down and was like, I want to do this. I want to do it right, and I want to make sure that for the first time I can win at this game. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I respect that. You know, people don't understand how hard it is to beat somebody who's been as dominant as I have in Ouya. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like it is not easy to be the challenging for the throne, because there's a lot of mental barriers that come with that. A lot of doubts, a lot of fears, and oftentimes your self-worth is challenged, and so it's very easy to give up right before the finish line. But I think that he finally, you know, with a lot of encouragement from his friends and a lot of people truly genuinely believing in him and rooting him on, myself included, because after a certain point, you know, at that point I had held world record for over 6 years continuously. And I don't know how many people watching this have ever been the best at something for that long. It's the heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I know a lot of people have heard that expression before, but there's something deeper when you're actually the person who is wearing the crown. It's I don't know. You know, I've always believed there's some things you can only see from the top, but it's also lonely up there.
Yeah.
And you lose. Oftentimes, what ends up happening is you just lose your motivation. And I've actually always said to people that, believe it or not, the hardest part of being a speedrunner is not getting the world record. It's keeping it.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the motivation that you had when you were first being the challenger trying to get this world record, it just evaporates in an instant. And you have to then figure out a new way to stay motivated every single time you pick up a controller. And I'm very, very proud of the 6+ years that I held world record in that category. But after a while, I was grinding the game again after a long break, and I was like, why am I doing this? You know, like what do I have to prove by playing this again?
Mm-hmm.
I was bored, you know, and like, so there was no malice at all when I saw that Tarna and Wiffle were getting very close. And in fact, I was rooting them on. I wanted to see them succeed because I wanted them to experience the same joy that succeeding finally gave me. That same like sense of purpose, that sense of fulfillment, that sense of like, I really can do what I set my mind out to do. You know, I wanted them to experience that because I just have a lot of respect for them as people and runners. And when Tarna got close, you know, I would do everything I could to just like help him and root him on. And then when he was finally able to do it, I was nothing but happy for him.
Hell yeah.
And I'm really proud of all the hard work that he's putting in. And as a matter of fact, the tone of our conversations have shifted a little bit, as you know, not to leak private stuff, but recently he came into my chat while I was streaming. He was like, how the hell do I stay motivated now that I've actually gotten world record?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, buddy, let me tell you, it's not easy.
Yeah. He's in the club now, you know?
He's in the club. He gets to, I was like, dude, just so you know, your experience with this game is going to change entirely. And it's cool to see him still grinding, but I think now now we're all in a position where the fun for us has no longer none of our reason of playing this game anymore is can we do it? Because we all know we can do it. The fun now is the shared mutual experience of trying to kick each other's butts,
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, man. Like, like speedrunning is what you make of it, but more than that, speedrunning is supposed to be fun. And there's nothing more fun or more rewarding in this entire world of speedrunning than having a rival. And so now it's just really amazing to see that when I eventually come back to this category, and I will come back, that Tarna has really stepped up his game, Wiffle has really stepped up his game, and we can all trade blows and just have a wonderful time doing it.
Hell yeah. Before we get too far off of it, talk to me about Wiffle too.
Yeah, Wiffle. Ugh, I love Wiffle. I don't know anybody in the Ratchet community who doesn't love Wiffle. He was always second fiddle to me for many years. Tarna was always third, Wiffle was always second, and I was always first. And that was the dynamic for a very long time. And Wiffle especially, I think, had a hard time. He had a very different struggle than Tarna had, where Tarna tended to lack the discipline to become consistent at movement tech, just because he would get burnt out pretty easily by practicing. Wiffle had the opposite problem, where his movement is so crisp. It's very, very precise and pristine. But he got in his own head so often. And he would always doubt himself. He would always say that he wasn't good enough. I'm kind of this is not exactly what he was thinking, I'm sure, but like this is as oversimplified as I can make it. I even remember there was a period of time where when I had 2816, I put a $1,000 bounty on anybody who could beat my world record in 1 year. And Wiffle got the closest. He got relatively close. I think he was like 20 or 15 or 20 seconds off, but he just couldn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I still gave him some compensation, some monetary compensation, just for putting in so much effort and so much love into the game. And this broke my heart. His response, the only thing he said was that he was sorry that he let me down.
Man.
And I was like, dude, that's not what this is about. Like it broke me a little bit. And I think that was really a turning point for me, where I realized that, like, I really want these guys to succeed. And when Wiffle finally sat down for what could be his last grind for a very long time, I think he'll come back eventually. But when he finally was like, I'm only 10 seconds off world record, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to do it. I don't think there was a single moment that people wanted more in the entirety of the game's history than when Wiffle finally got world record. It was like, I don't know a single person who didn't pop off when he got it. Like, it was, people popped off when Tarna beat me just because the streak was finally over. Mm-hmm. I mean, people didn't dislike Tarna by any means, but like, Tarna is notoriously like a kind of a shitter in the community. and so, like, there weren't people who like loved him. A lot of us like Tarna, but there weren't people who love him the same way that everyone loved Wiffle. Everyone wanted Wiffle to succeed. And so it was just like this like orgiastic moment in the community where everyone could finally celebrate Wiffle having the world record. So it was just super cool.
Yeah, man. I'm tearing up over here. There was a Twitter thread that I saw from Wiffle like a week before he got it, which I thought was
Mhm.
really cool. Like that, I have a lot of trouble doing things unless either I want to or I'll be immediately impacted. This lack of willpower has led me to not being quite where I expected in this point in life. It's my greatest flaw, right? And
Mhm.
he's like, I'm going to like put my nose to the grindstone and come hell or high water, like I'm gonna fucking do this shit.
Yeah.
And it was right before we got record, and I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the kind of hope that people need to see, that like no matter who you are or no matter what doubts you have, if you put your mind to something and you study hard and you practice and you don't give up and you always keep trying, you can succeed. You know, it doesn't matter what that measure of success is because no one can define success, right?
Mhm.
But you can always find your own personal level of success, whatever that may be.
Absolutely. All right, Zem. That's my questions.
Great.
Is there
Um,
anything else that we haven't talked about that you're like, damn it, we have to talk about this if it's going in the video?
um, something, the best to ever fucking do it. Don't you ever
Mhm.
forget it.
Yep.
Something, I will come back and I'm gonna spank these boys. I'm gonna spank them right on their butt cheeks. Um, and well, I mean, I say that. I hope I'll come back as strong as I have in the past.
Mhm.
The only reason I have doubts is because I'm trying to shift my focus as a content creator, like I said before.
Right.
And my emphasis is going to be less on being a hyper competitive speedrunner and more of somebody who creates worthwhile content. And this is actually, this is a bit of a sidebar that's not really related to the video, but in case you or CJ are ever curious, I wrote a massive research paper, and it's only in the first stages. So when I do the more final academic draft, it's probably
Mhm.
going to be a pretty substantial read. But I wrote a very long researched paper on how to crack the YouTube algorithm.
Ooh.
Um, so that is something that's actually, honestly my proudest work I've ever done.
Hell yeah, dude.
If you ever want to read it, you're more than welcome to have access to it. I'm trying to share it with as many content creators as possible because I want everybody to elevate, you know?
Fuck yeah, dude. Is it in a
Um,
good readable state right now, or do you want to work on it a little longer?
1.0 is pretty readable. It's not amazing, but it's concise. It's
Okay.
like it says what it needs to say and then it gets out. It's currently
Okay.
16 pages. My more academic version is probably be closer to 30 or 50. Um, but yeah, I'm very proud of it. So that's like I'm really going all in. Um, my more important goal, rather than anything speedrunning related, I want to get 100,000 YouTube subscribers by September 2022.
All
We'll
right.
uh we'll see how close I get, but if worse comes to worse, I'll fall back on being the Ouya guy.
There you go. You got that in
So
your back pocket. So
yeah, I still love the game. I'm so proud of not just Tarna, not just Wiffle, but everybody who's ever put love into the game. Um, it's everybody who shares that same mutual love of Ratchet and Clank and Ratchet and Clank speedrunning. They're like a second family to me, and I wouldn't be who I am today without these people. So I love them a lot.
fuck yeah, dude. I'm all about it.
Hell yeah.
Alrighty. Zem, thank you so much for talking to me. This has
Of
been
course.
very, very enlightening. Let me
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
if you have any other questions or any other bits of perspective that you'd like, you can always feel free to hit me up again.
Absolutely. You know I will.
Hell yeah, dude.
All right. Let's wrap that up here. Bye, Craig.